So when the lights are dimmed, I notice I'm still a little bit out of breath. I just had to run up to check something. And it doesn't look like a big room, but it actually is, if you're not fit like me. But we're all here for ArcGIS Enterprise. So there's going to be an update about, well, the latest in this piece of software. And presenters today will be me, Boudewijn, Scott Bradley, my colleague, manager of managed services at Eagle Technology. And we also have a guest speaker, and you may have seen him this morning at the plenary. That's Peter Willoughby from Wakakoti Kotahi, talking a little bit more about the technical part of why they chose for Kubernetes. Also, if you don't know what Kubernetes is, we'll talk more about that and explain it further. So the agenda for today is a little bit of a high over. So what I want to start off with is a little bit of an overview of ArcGIS Enterprise, what it is like as a WebGIS, and also how it compares to ArcGIS Online. Then also we're going to do some technology updates. So looking a little bit at the management and deployment side of things, looking at what is new in 10.9.1. That's relevant because what's new in 10.9.1 is also new in ArcGIS Enterprise 11. But we're also going to talk specifically about ArcGIS Enterprise 11. And all that we do first, and then we move to ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes. Well, where we're here from Peter and Scott to talk more about what it is. Right, so let's get into a bit of an overview. So we've got ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise that can serve as your WebGIS. So that is it's a key component in your GIS system. It allows you to connect to ArcGIS Pro. So with ArcGIS Pro you can publish to your WebGIS, but also you can consume from your WebGIS. It also drives all the geo-enabled apps. So that are all the web applications. We've seen a lot of already in other sessions. I mean, dashboards, I think they've been in almost every session. And it's also, so all the capabilities that you see are also available to developers. That is for managing and the administration side of your ArcGIS Enterprise. It's also for managing your content, even doing analysis, and even build on top of your ArcGIS Enterprise. But we quite often get asked if that ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise are both a WebGIS. What are the differences? When do I choose one or the other? So I just want to go, in the next slide, go through a couple of these things where they're similar, but also where they differ. So if we look at the similarities, they all provide a single website. It's where you log in, it's where you do your management, it's where you host all of your data. It's where you can create your apps and your maps. It also gives you access to all those configurable apps that we see published everywhere. It also supports all the apps for in the field, but also for in the office. And it gives you access to Living Atlas. And also, both of them you can talk to through APIs and SDKs. But there are some differences. And first differences are in the infrastructure and how you install it and how you deploy ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. Because ArcGIS Online is a full SaaS, a software as a service product. So you just get the subscription and you can get started. It's all hosted on Esri servers, so you don't have to worry about those. Also, it is scaled, managed, and updated by Esri. ArcGIS Enterprise, on the other hand, you install it on infrastructure that you control. So that can be on the cloud, that can be on premises, it can be on virtual machines. You can also you have more control over how you design it. So you can design highly customized systems using ArcGIS Enterprise, and you've got complete control over that system. There's also some differences in capabilities. So with ArcGIS Online, you can extend ArcGIS Online with ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online, so you can publish image services. If you want to work with IoT, there's ArcGIS Velocity that you can add to ArcGIS Online to ingest, analyze, and manage all your IoT inputs. And there's ArcGIS Notebooks for ArcGIS Online, and that allows you to run Python code in ArcGIS Online in the cloud. Then there's ArcGIS Enterprise, and with ArcGIS Enterprise you got a base deployment that allows you to publish services, create apps, but you can also extend it using server roles. So for example, you've got the image server role, giving you capabilities for image services and raster analytics. There's the notebook server. We'll talk about some of these roles a bit more in the next slide. Another big differentiator is that it allows you to connect to user-managed data stores, so your SQL servers. Also to cloud stores, so if you've got data hosted in Azure, AWS, you can connect to those using ArcGIS Enterprise. And same for cloud data warehouses that is being introduced since, I think, 10.9, 10.8, 10.9, to be able to connect to those as well. And then there's additional services that you can publish with ArcGIS Enterprise, like geocoding, print, and other geoprocessing processing services. So if we look a little bit quickly at what server roles there are available, and we won't go into these too deep, but there's a few I wanted to highlight. So there's the knowledge server. So we heard a little bit about ArcGIS Knowledge before, and that actually comes with a new server role and also a new data store to manage and host all the data and be able to analyze that data and connect to it from ArcGIS Pro. Got Geo Event Server for your real-time data and the storage of your big data using the spatial big data store. Image server, I talked about, notebook server, workflow manager server. Geo-analytics server is there for your big data vector processing. So these are all, this is all extra capabilities that you can add to your ArcGIS Enterprise. And it's quite often, it's not a case of ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online. We see a lot of organizations that use both. For example, a lot of organizations enable Living Atlas in their ArcGIS Enterprise, and that is using services that are coming from ArcGIS Online, for example. But also through distributed collaboration, you can share data from one portal to the other. And a workflow we quite often see is that the data is being managed in ArcGIS Enterprise, it's being updated, it's being organized there. But then through distributed collaboration, a copy of the data is being pushed into ArcGIS Online for example, for the open data sites. So you don't have to get that traffic onto your ArcGIS Enterprise, but ArcGIS Online deals with that. So that's something that we quite often see. If we look at the components that are being installed with a base installation, then you've got your ArcGIS server that's doing all your mapping and analysis. You've got Portal for ArcGIS, and that is where you create and manage all of your spatial data, but also manage your users. And then the ArcGIS Web Adapter that integrates ArcGIS Portal and server with your own organization's web servers and the security infrastructure. And the data store provides storage for all your services, so that that can be for your feature services in a relational data store, tile cache data store, and the spatial temporal data store. And all this can be installed on Windows and Linux. And a new deployment, what we'll talk about later, is Kubernetes. So this is for, if you're managing it, the end user that actually uses ArcGIS probably doesn't see the difference between ArcGIS Enterprise on one hand and ArcGIS Online on the other hand. For them, it's a WebGIS. You log in with your field maps, or you log into the portal. And apart from some capability differences, the user experience is the same. So before we go to Scott to talk a little bit more about deployment, I just got a question for you, and that is on what version you're currently on. So I want to do a little bit of a raise of hands. So if you're on 10.7.x, raise your hand. See a few. 10.8.x, few more. 10.9. Ooh, look at that. People that are on a version lower than 10.7. Yeah, that's interesting. It's good to see that so many people are on the latest versions, because it is important to keep up, we feel, not only to get all the capabilities that are available, but also, I think that is the main thing, but maybe there's something from the back-end perspective as well that will...
Yeah, it's definitely encouraging. I mean, we advocate definitely for that currency, at least, not one version or only one version behind. It's definitely good to see that everyone's, keeping up to date, and not only from a, security perspective, but also, there's always nice goodies that you get with those later versions of the software that Esri packages in. So.
Yeah. One final question. Who actually manages the deployment of their ArcGIS Enterprise? So there's a few here. But I always think, even if you're not managing it yourself, it is good to know what is happening behind the scenes, because you can actually ask the right questions to the person who is managing it. So with that, let's go over to you.
Cool. Just to phrase that a little bit differently, who in the audience, if just raise their hands, has actually ever installed ArcGIS Enterprise, whether it be production or, so a few more hands I see, raised up. So that's good to see. So in this next section, I'm just going to go through just some of the deployment improvements and a little bit about automated deployments as well. So move through. Can you move? Cool. So just on the install side, you'll be pleased to note that at 10.9.1, the speed of install has been improved. So Esri's done quite a little bit of work behind the scenes to make sure that the installation is a little bit quicker than it has been in the past. Over time, in terms of ArcGIS Enterprise, the amount of files that are within the portal component has increased greatly, leading to greater install times. So Esri's recognised this, and if you've actually installed a fresh version of 10.9.1, you'll actually see that it's definitely a lot faster. One of the other factors there that we'll talk about a little bit more in detail later on is that if you're doing a fresh install of 10.9.1 as well, you get to opt out of installing the ArcMap runtime. So if you're no longer using ArcMap at all, it's probably a good option to take. And if you can guarantee that it's just a fresh install and there's no services published with ArcMap, then it's a safe option too. So just keep that in mind if you're pushing through those next buttons and kind of miss that step, which is all good. Next slide. Yep. I can try.
Yeah. Might as well.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. So one of the other things, has anyone upgraded to 11 yet? Anyone in the room?
Yeah.
Upgraded?
In the back there. Yeah.
Yep. So Esri's also improved some of the screens that you'll see in the upgrade process. So a lot of times you push continue upgrade, and hopefully it does its thing and you get a nice upgraded solution at the end. But Esri's kind of got a nice feedback screen now, which sort of gives you a bit of a progress update on what pieces of the platform it's upgrading, where it's at in that process, and if there's any issues with any of those things, it'll give you some nice warning messages as well around saying, hey, well, there's a problem here, you might need to fix that. So yeah, it's quite nice to see these. It definitely improves the experience, and this is definitely something that I've appreciated with using the Kubernetes, the latest releases of ArcGIS Enterprise. There's a lot of these types of screens in there, which give you really good feedback.
You can use arrows.
Yeah. So that's, a lot of you are probably doing manual deployments, but there are automated options, and some of those on the software side. You've got you can write some chef cookbooks that you can deploy your ArcGIS Enterprise software, or you can use PowerShell DSC. And if you're deploying into the cloud as well, there's obviously builder options for both AWS and Azure, as well as CloudFormation templates. Automation is a great way to go, not only for repeatable tasks. You may not be deploying ArcGIS Enterprise all that often, but it does deliver, a level of consistency across your deployments if you're doing, multiple ones, or potentially test and pre-production, production style deployments. It often increases your productivity too, because you're spending less time kind of seeing when to press the next button. It's fully kind of automated end to end, and it scales to that demand, especially if you're like me, who is a service provider, and maybe not me these days, but my team deploys a large number of enterprise systems for customers. One of the other things to note also is that some of the post-deployment tasks, such as you might have a set of base maps that you use for the deployment, or you might need to add a lot of users to a particular group. You can use the ArcGIS API for Python to do some of those after deployment tasks, so that you just don't get a vanilla shell ArcGIS Enterprise when the users go and interact with it. It's got all those nice base components. Even simple things like setting your logos, making sure you've got a nice front page, all of those, kind of cosmetic details that always make a system more pleasant to use. So I alluded to it. We use the same toolkit pretty much. So a lot of in managed services, we use a lot of automation to kind of basically do these deployments. We utilize the PowerShell DSC to do the software deployment side, but because we're deploying infrastructure in the cloud, we also use products like Terraform, which is infrastructure as code, to deploy off our consistent reference designs. So we're always kind of refining these, but we've got a kind of a templated approach, which allows us to get a really high level of consistency, especially around things like security compliance. So we want to make sure that when we deploy these environments, they've got all the same security rules applied to them. And if that list is updated, it goes into the template and gets rolled out to the next one. One note as well is these designs are going further from just deploying software. When we're going into the cloud, we're getting a lot more challenges on security aspects, and having to put a lot more appliances in there around web application firewalls and those types of things for our single ingress point. And I definitely encourage you to, if you catch me around the Expo and you're interested in some of our design philosophy, to come and chat to me more in depthly. The other one there also is that I'll just touch on quickly is Helm, which is another automated approach. It's pretty much a package manager for Kubernetes. So Esri's actually provided all of the scripting for this. Allows us to kind of deploy the whole ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes as a kind of a full DevOps approach, so full automation, and it's quite rewarding when all that stuff comes together. Right, so I thought I'd also touch on a few post-deployment tools. So these have been around. A couple of these have been around for a while. Is anyone familiar with the portal scans and the service scan tooling behind the hood? These are quite good tools to run after you've done a deployment, because they will provide you with recommendations around things you might want to address from a security point of view on your server or on portal. And you obviously don't have to follow these, but if you're an organisation that has some tight rules around certain things, you might want to heed, especially the critical ones. One of the other things that has been added at the 11 release is a similar tool that does that for health. So it doesn't check the security so much, but it will check the health of your deployment. When we say health, it might be working, but there might be things that you haven't configured, like WebGIS backups. It'll recommend that you have some sort of backup of your enterprise. If one of your data stores isn't working so well, it'll call that out. If you've got some expired certificates or those SSL certificates or those sorts of things, it'll include that in the report. And these tools are just a nice little check after you've done an outstanding job of deploying ArcGIS Enterprise, but they just give you a little bit of guidance and it force you down a bit of a best practice route as well. What do we got here? The big one, so patching. I thought I'd call, patching seems pretty dull, but it's one of those really important things nowadays that you should be checking it at least on a regular basis, and I'd say monthly, to see if there's any available ArcGIS Enterprise patches across all of the components, whether it be the data store, the server, the portal. There may be patches released. Some of them will be fixes in terms of functionality, but more often than not, there'll be security enhancements built into these patches. And Esri usually releases a couple of dedicated security patches per year. And I'd say those ones are definitely the ones that you want to apply to your system, and it'll keep all of your, your IT department pretty happy that you have applied those, especially if they come to you and say that there's this thing called log4j and are you vulnerable? You can say, well, I'm all over it. I'm all over it. Esri did also put a good patch out, and sorry, not a good patch, a good blog out after kind of that event, but other ones as well. Just sort of saying, how you should be looking at those, those patches and applying them regularly, and where to find the tooling for that. Like Patch Finder, great tool. You just need to run it up, tells you what patches are available, and it will download them and deploy them to your system. Obviously, when you've gone through all the change control as well. Right, so one of the other things that has been out for a little bit since 10.8.1, but I'm not necessarily aware of too many people who have configured it or know of its importance. There's some email support now with ArcGIS Enterprise, which means you can actually configure a mail server to send email from the system. Now, at 10.8.1, this was just an API configurable thing. At 10.9, they gave you a nice interface, which made it really easy to configure, as long as you had access to a mail server. And some of the things that once you've configured this, that it enables, is basically it'll email your administrators if there's a license that's about to expire. It will email you if your database is running out of, your ArcGIS data store is running out of storage, or even your federated servers now at 10.9.1. So there's some really good notifications that are sent out to administrators, and it also will support your users as well. If the administrator updates the password policy, it'll send an email to the users saying, hey, updated the password policy, you now have to put in 20 question marks in your password. So there's some really good functionality there. So if you can, and your IT department enables it, I'd definitely encourage you to configure that. Just another note that the ArcGIS data store has got that new functionality where if it actually goes into read-only mode as well, it will ping you an email saying it's in read-only mode. And this is something that, just to share a little antidote, is something that we've encountered even briefly. If the data store goes into read-only mode, you won't be able to publish any services. We've experienced it before with, say, some temporary storage, filled up, consumed all the space, but then cleaned itself up. The data store will still stay in read-only mode, even though you have adequate amount of storage there, and it was just temporary that it went into the red. So it's good to get notified of that, because you may not recognise it otherwise. There's also some good some disk cleanup utilities that have been packaged into ArcGIS Enterprise as well. There's some temporary files that get stored after upgrades and backups. So these utilities help kind of clear away that temporary space. Very similar to, Windows used to have those tools where it would empty your recycle bin, when you were running out of space to gain a little bit of space back. Similar tool to that. And that's over to you, Bodavane, for what's new.
A little bit of a look at what's new in 10.9.1. And like I said, what's new in 10.9.1 is also in 11. It's good to see that quite a lot of you are already on 10.9.1, so some of this may not come as a surprise, but I just want to go through it anyways. And what I want to start with is some updates to the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And one thing that can be a bit of work is adding a lot of users to your ArcGIS Enterprise. So we heard you can use the ArcGIS API for Python for that. There's other ways of doing it, but one of the easier ways, especially if you're not a coder, is just feeding a CSV to ArcGIS Enterprise, and it will create all those users. However, you got to get a template right. And now if you go through this process, you can actually download a template, so you're sure that all the fields that are required for this are there, and all you have to do is fill them out. Another new capability has to do with webhooks. So webhooks allow you to, based on an event, trigger an action in another system, like Microsoft Power Automate, for example. And currently, you can have triggers that are based on users, items, and groups. So if something changes with that, a trigger can be sent. And you can now run an ArcGIS notebook server for specific events as well. So you can actually go crazy with Python and do what it is that you need to do. And you can have it triggered by maybe an item that is shared publicly. And maybe you want to do some checks on that, written those checks in Python, and you can have those run automatically after an event. The map viewer. I'm not sure if you all went to the sessions where the new map viewer functionality was shown, but we've seen a lot of examples of the new map viewer, and there's a lot of great new capabilities. Things like blending effects, layer effects. You can make it much easier to create pretty maps, but also it allows you to get direct feedback if you're changing the symbology, for example, because it can be quite annoying to change the color, click OK, finding out it's not quite right, having to go into these settings again, change the color slightly, click OK in order to see it, and you get direct feedback with that now. Also, so with 10.9.1, it's included as by default. It used to be a separate installer. You can still decide what is going to be the default map viewer for your organization. So that can be set on the organizational level, and also users can set it in their profile what the default viewer is for them. There's also some updates to the scene viewer. You may have seen some of those, like the edit features. So you can now edit features in the scene viewer. And that includes 3D features that you can extrude straight from the scene viewer. Also, you can create elevation profile charts. You can configure pop-ups, highly requested. And I think the last one is one of my favorites, because that allows you to save those settings that you made to the symbology and the pop-ups. So if you add that same layer to another scene viewer, it will if you've saved the layer, it will use those settings that you've created, like the pop-up and the symbology. For content and data management. So there's a new experience for adding content. So there's a button, new item, and that takes you through a workflow to add new content. It also gives you a drag and drop functionality. So if you've got a zip file to your database in your Windows Explorer, you just drop it and it will proceed to the next step, asking you if you want to publish it as a feature layer. Also there's cloud data warehouse support. So the supported ones at the moment are BigQuery, Google BigQuery, Snowflake, and Amazon Redshift. They are supported with ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Pro, and you register them basically similar to how you register a database in the manager. What you can do as well in ArcGIS Pro to those data stores is create a direct connection to them. Also new is more support for the Google Cloud. So ArcGIS Enterprise supports some of the features that are related to Google Cloud. So you can use the cloud storage for caching and image workflows. And you can use the SQL Server and the Postgres database from the Google Cloud into your ArcGIS Enterprise now. And there's some updates to apps as well. And this is actually important for the next part where we go to ArcGIS Enterprise 11, and that is the instant apps. So they've been released in 10.9.0 in ArcGIS Enterprise, and now there's some new capabilities. You can create them. You've got to create apps from your content pane. You can also filter. So if you're looking for an app, you can filter by capability. So if you want to have a filter app or an edit app, you can type those capabilities in and it will show you the options that you have available. And this is important for later on when we move to 11. Another one is the ArcGIS dashboard. So there's a new generation of ArcGIS dashboard, and that is built on the JavaScript API 4.x, and that gives a lot of extra capabilities and extra performance. So you can create data expressions. You can do formatting using Arcade. You can create selection-based displays. So there's quite a few improvements, and if you have a dashboard in the old template, you can just open it and save it as the new one in 10.9.1. And then we'll move to ArcGIS Enterprise 11, and that's actually pretty big, as in I think the last 12 years, we've had 10.0, 10.1, and all the other versions. And ArcGIS Server, that was released in 2010, ArcGIS Server 10.0, and that is now part of ArcGIS Enterprise. And the move to 11 is because there are some pretty significant changes, both under the hood as in the apps department. And we basically split it up. So I'll be talking about what has changed in on the app side, and Scott will talk about what actually changed under the hood, making this such a significant change. So if you upgrade to ArcGIS Enterprise 11, there will be a lot of configurable apps that you may know from previous versions or from ArcGIS Online that won't be installed anymore. So they will be removed, which means that if you have an app and you upgrade, and that configurable app doesn't exist anymore, the item will still be there, but you won't be able to open or edit it anymore if you move to 11. On the right-hand side, there's a list of the apps that won't be removed. They will still be in ArcGIS Enterprise 11. But for all the other ones, you can use 10.9.1 to basically create a new app using one of the instant apps or one of the apps that won't be removed before you migrate to 11. Also, similar story for the classic Esri story map templates. So there's a new ArcGIS story maps available if you still have apps that are built using one of the classic templates, they will need to be migrated before you move to 11. And again, 10.9.1 can be sort of your vehicle in between because it supports all the templates, the story map templates, as well as the new ArcGIS story maps. Yeah, and then the dashboards. So I talked about the dashboards before. The dashboards, the old ArcGIS dashboards will be removed from ArcGIS Enterprise 11. However, all your existing dashboards will be automatically upgraded to the new ArcGIS dashboards. And with that, once you open them, so you won't be able to create new ones using the old ArcGIS dashboards, but you will still be able to use your existing dashboards. The only thing is they are upgraded, so you got a new editing experience and actually more capabilities for it. So that's on the apps department side, but there's also something about an SDK and runtimes.
Cool, thanks for that. Yeah, you already flicked to the next slide. I was going to have a bit of an intro. I'm going to go back.
Sorry.
Yeah, so as Bodavane alluded to, 10.9.1, because of the changes, or pretty much like, a bit of housekeeping, I guess Esri's doing, cleaning out some of the, the older technology so that the product doesn't get, too bloated going forward. You could say they're getting rid of some of the technical debt. At 11. So 10.9.1 will definitely become, quite a holding version. It's good to see like a lot of you already at that version, and there's probably some analysis that you'll need to do potentially before you move to 11. Another point, but I can't remember what it was, so I'll just go to the next slide. So, oh yes, that's right. I'm going to go back. I was going to ask a question actually, because there are quite a large number of, sorry about that, this is just random. There are quite a large number of 10.9.1 users in the room. I'd be interested to see like how many of you are still publishing services to your ArcGIS Enterprise 10.9.1 from ArcMap. Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Good to see. Good, the marketing and the messaging's getting through. So it's good to see that there's a lot of ArcGIS Pro adopters, and there shouldn't be too much you need to do to get on the 11 bandwagon. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway. ArcGIS 11, just some of the updates behind the scenes that are changing that you'll need to consider before you move there. On the SDK, the ArcGIS Enterprise SDK side, they are moving to .NET 6. So what does that mean? Unless you're a developer, probably not much. But if you've got any custom SOIs or SOEs, Server Object Extenders or Interceptors, you may need to do a little bit more than just recompile for the new version. So if you've got any of those, you might want to just talk to your developer to make sure they're aware that this change is there, and they can just review any libraries that they've used, and hopefully it won't be too difficult to update that code so it works nicely on 11. But probably the one that's more relevant to most of the room is the fact that the runtime, the ArcMap runtime, is being removed. So if you don't know, there's two runtimes as part of ArcGIS Enterprise. So when you publish a service with ArcGIS Pro, it uses one runtime, the ArcGIS Pro runtime. If you publish a service with ArcMap, it uses the ArcMap runtime. And that's the one that is being deprecated. So that one is not moving past 10.9.1. So it's still in 10.9.1, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're moving to 11, you have to ensure that there's none of those services when you do that upgrade. And Esri's been nice enough to, at the 10.9.1 release, to package some migration tools. Which is great, so it makes it really easy to move from one runtime to the other. And also with the automated tool that they've created, it makes it really easy to discover if there are any ArcMap services that have been published on your system. And I'd say if you've been using ArcGIS Enterprise for a very long time, you might not know, there might be one that's sitting there that hasn't been touched for many years that was originally published with ArcMap. So this little migration tool will sort you out there. A little bit ahead of myself. Here we go, back on this slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, you can do that manually, just one by one. If you've got 300 services, that might take you a little bit of time. Or you can do it by bulk with this little tool that Esri's created, which is Update ArcMap Services. And I'll show you where to find that in a little demo shortly. One of the other things is that some services will have to be republished. So the basic ones, yeah, the migration tool works fine. But for some services, you will have to republish them to get them to use that runtime, and especially for things like custom GP tools, because it's not only the runtime that's kind of going away. A lot of you probably do a bit of Python. You probably know Python 2.7. It's been a hero for a long period of time, but that's actually going to go away as well. So we know in ArcGIS Pro that 3.6 I think it is packaged in there. So anything that you publish with ArcGIS Pro is using that later version of Python, which is fine. But anything you've published from GP tool from ArcMap, and I know, are there anyone from local government councils in the room? Any local government representatives? Well, I know one of the things that the first custom GP tool that usually gets written and published is the print, a nice print tool that can support custom layouts, so you can have your nice logos and bits and pieces when you use the print service. Now, there's a lot of councils out there that are running that service for a long period of time. It probably might have been published with ArcMap and ArcMap layouts. Can't remember what they were called. Back in the day, so you'll need to migrate that to publish it from ArcGIS Pro, and also use the new layouts in Pro, and create some new layouts, which are really nice to use. So shouldn't be any issues there. What have I missed? Let's go to the demo. Yeah, so I'm just going to also flick over to a bit of a demo and just show you where you find that. So I think number one, if we get this out of the way, hang on. We switch over to number one. Cool. Righty. Let's just going to launch my machine where. Oh, that's not going to work. Always an error. I know how to get past that error, so it's okay. I'll just refresh that, and we'll be fine. It's all these security features that trip you up when you leave your machine, like just idle on a screen for a period of time, and it goes, well, someone could come in and steal your sessions or cancel your session. But that's fine, we can get around that. Righty, I'll just log into that. Actually, the first thing I'll show you is the manager, not that manager interface, this one. The manager interface, and this is obviously ArcGIS Enterprise. This is a 10.9.1 system. And I've got a few services here that have been published with ArcMap. Had to install ArcMap especially for this demo. So let's go to one of these, and you'll notice if I click into one of these, first of all, it'll give me a nice little warning. So basically tell me, hey, you should think about swapping out the runtime. So when I see that warning, I say, oh, well, I might do that later, or I could do that right now. So the manual way to get around it is I just go here. Tells me that ArcMap is deprecated. It's a bit scary. But I can just switch this particular service using the ArcGIS Pro runtime, and happy days. that will restart and do its thing. So while we're waiting for that to restart and switch over to the ArcGIS Pro runtime, if I had 300 services, I might not want to go through them. It's done here and updated to that runtime. I might want to do this as a bulk exercise. So there's a little tool. I'll just show you actually where to find this tool, because I've just got it on my desktop. That's not really where it sits. Oops, that's not the one. We can jump in here and we can find where I've installed, if I can remember, where I've installed server. And there's a tools directory down here. And then there's a little, if I find it, update ArcMap services. And there's a little batch file in here that you can run that would do it. I'll just run this one on my desktop. Just fires off a little command and should launch a page, which will tell me exactly what services. So that's just the analyze function. Will tell me exactly what services I have using the ArcMap runtime. What you can do using that command line tool is just give it a little bit of an execute flag, and it will go through and update all of those. So you might want to just have a look first, and then you might want to go, yeah, that's fine, let's blitz the whole lot, and you can do that as a bulk activity. Just back over here to, can't tell the difference between those two. Just back over here as well, you would have noticed there was a GP tool in here as well. So just want to show you, we'll give you that same warning. So it will tell you that, hey, this is using the ArcMap runtime, needs to be replaced, but I don't get that option to update it. I would have to basically replicate this tool in ArcGIS Pro using Python 3 and republish that service, and then I can delete this one and safely upgrade to 11. Was I going to do another demo here, was I? Was I going to show the patch thingy, or can I do that? No, okay, that's sweet. Sweet, okay. Sorry, no more demos.
Maybe at the end if you're like hanging around for a little bit. But I think we got some more things to cover. So we are back on my screen. Yeah, so there's a lot of information in there, and Esri actually has a really good blog about what you got to be aware of when migrating to ArcGIS 11. Also, if migrating to ArcGIS Pro, and there weren't many of you that raised their hands, but maybe some people are just not raising their hands. But if you want to learn more about migrating to ArcGIS Pro, you can go to the Eagle website, the eagle.co.nz. We actually collated a whole bunch of information, put it into one spot that can help you moving to ArcGIS Pro if you're still using ArcMap. So it's not all about major changes and things disappearing in ArcGIS Enterprise 11. It is a big focus because it's sort of, I don't know, a fresh start. There are some new things as well. And one of the new things is the way that ArcGIS Enterprise 11 is going to be versioned. It's still using 11.0, 11.1, 11.2, but it doesn't have the releases anymore. Also good to be aware of is that the even numbers, so the .0, .2, will be short-term support releases, and the odd numbered versions, so 10 or 11.1, 11.3, will be long-term support releases. And many of you may be waiting for 11.1 to go to production. That one is currently planned for late Q1 of 2023. Some other things that will be new in ArcGIS Enterprise 11 is resampling tile layers. So you actually, so when you cache a tile surface, you can use resampling to be able to zoom in deeper without actually having to cache tiles. People who are caching will probably notice, and you can set these settings in the portal interface now of the item. Also something called response caching is introduced, and that is a caching level between what is it, the web and your data store. It's therefore hosted feature service, and it should increase performance of those hosted feature services, as in not all queries have to go back into that data store anymore. Another new thing, and I'll be talking more about that tomorrow in the imagery session, that is Deep Learning Studio. That's part of the image server, the ArcGIS image server role. And it basically is a web interface to provide you a workflow, an end-to-end workflow for deep learning, from creating training samples to the actual inferencing of your deep learning. Also in beta will be, I talked about webhooks before, webhooks on feature services will be added. In 11.0 it will be a beta, it will be final in 11.1. And it will work on both reference feature service as hosted feature services. So basically what it means is if an update is done, a delete, or any action on a feature service, it can trigger a webhook event, just like the item and user and group events can be triggered. Another thing is that a geoprocessing tool can do the same. So it can trigger a webhook, and it can feed it with information whether it was successful or whether it failed, and with other information that you add to it. So from there you can decide what the next action will be. So the release timeline for this is, it is in beta, so you can use it, you can test it, but it won't be function complete. Also, there's no user interface for setting up these webhooks. Yet you got to go to the admin interface. From 11.1, it will be fully functional and supported, and there will be a user interface for it as well. Another beta function is the custom data feeds. That isn't there yet. Last time I checked, it is coming soon. It's going to be a separate install. And basically what it allows you to do is, apart from all the data stores that are supported in ArcGIS Enterprise, there are those data stores that aren't supported, or where you can't take the data from that system into your ArcGIS Enterprise. So what this allows you to do is basically connect to something like Elasticsearch, which isn't currently supported in ArcGIS Enterprise. Data stays in Elasticsearch, but you create a custom data feed that results in a feature service through ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Portal. So you can work with it as in any other feature service, but the data stays in the system where it's connected to. And that's beta functionality, and that is actually in itself something new, to have beta functionality in release software. It's a new approach for ArcGIS Enterprise, and there's two ways that it's being done. So the feature services are installed by default, but in beta. The custom data feeds will be a separate install, but it will always be on the short-term support releases that beta functionality is going to be installed with ArcGIS Enterprise. So for the long-term support releases, there won't be any beta features available. And then we're going to the next topic, and that is ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes, and I'll pass it on to you.
Caught me napping there. I was like,
did I go too fast?
I was thinking about what I could do with custom data feeds, and
yeah. Once it's there, we'll have a play with it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so it should be pretty close release. I think Q3 was their target. Right, so Kubernetes. Who in the room has actually heard that there's a release of ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes? I mean, who'll show of hands? Cool. So, everyone's onto it, looks like, or most people, which is great. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of a quick overview, and then I'm going to hand over to one of our customers that we've been working with on Kubernetes as well. So let's just start into it. So the first thing that I just want to call out is that it's the same ArcGIS Enterprise, just a new deployment style. So anyone that's creating apps, publishing services, configuring web maps, all of that, using mobile devices to access ArcGIS Enterprise content, there won't be any change. They'll see this as the same product, same web interface. Everything will be identical. The second thing is that at this stage, only the base deployment or the ArcGIS Enterprise core components have been containerized and delivered on Kubernetes. So you may, in the first instance, if you go down this route, utilize some sort of hybrid system where you federate in Windows machines into your base deployment as well. At this stage, only image services and also the GIS server role are supported. So that's a key point. So it's all of those same components that you're used to, but they're just packaged in a different way. So this is kind of a really high-level view of how Kubernetes is delivered and how it differs. I don't want to go into too much detail in the time we have, but really it's going to provide additional resilience, scalability, and manageability. Those are the core foundations. It's delivered with microservices, so pretty much just think of all of the little functions in ArcGIS Enterprise right now have kind of been broken into smaller units and can all be scaled, and resilience can be built around those individual sets of functionality. Right now you might pile all those components onto a single machine, and that's kind of more of the monolithic kind of software deployment. Everything's on that machine. It's only as resilient as that machine. With the microservices, it just opens up a lot more possibility. The delivery mechanism is also key as well. I alluded to like installing ArcGIS Enterprise previously. To get through a full ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, it can take a number of hours to get all the components deployed and configured and all of that. Now, the Kubernetes solution is all delivered as containers, so there's no more downloading software. You basically just connect to Esri's container repository and pull down all the containers, and it just deploys them into your Kubernetes cluster. And that happens very quickly. All of the components are most part pre-configured, and you can pretty much deploy the install of the software as a number of minutes to deploy it. It takes a little bit longer to configure it, but the whole thing can be up and running in under an hour. And this flows through, this delivery mechanism flows through to your upgrades as well. So, you're all familiar with how you upgrade maybe ArcGIS Pro. You get notified, there's an update, and you push the button and it downloads the software and installs the update. Works in a very similar way. It's very seamless. You can build automation around it, and it sort of encourages that approach. And IT departments really love it as well. The whole system is, all its moving parts, all these microservices, everything. It's a little bit overwhelming, but the bit where Kubernetes comes in is that it orchestrates all of those pieces. So it orchestrates the resilience, it orchestrates the scalability. So there's not too much you have to do to actually enable that, and that all happens pretty much out of the box. And one of the things I really like is some of the streamlined administration capabilities. So this really is a product that, sort of makes me happy as a back-end administrator, operator. There's not too much difference from a front-end point of view. But if you are thinking that this might be right for you, all these things sound good, they're all nice, juicy, non-functional requirements. Yeah, I want resiliency, I want scalability. You still have to think about how you're going to water and feed it, because there probably, in the user community, or especially the GIS user community, there's probably not a huge amount of familiarity with Kubernetes. And I guess, just another show of hands, like around Kubernetes, who's actually used Kubernetes? It doesn't have to be in a GIS context, but it might be for some other little application that you deployed as a containerized. Is there anyone that's, that's using it outside of GIS in the room? Maybe a couple, which is all good. So it will be take some time to develop those skills. And my team was spent the last kind of year working towards that and getting familiar with the product, making sure that we can manage and maintain it in a production sense. And we've partnered with Waka Kotahi on that to kind of go along that journey, sort of take their requirements and their use cases and see if we can get Kubernetes to work in that environment and meet their needs. But instead of me waffling on about it, I'll get Peter to the stage and he can talk to you about the decision making that they've gone through. So thanks, Pete.
Cheers. A couple of slides, there you go. Hi, good afternoon. It's a bit loud. Thanks for having me on again. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our, geospatial digital transformation. This is just going to be a little bit more of a storytelling around our journey, how we got to where we are, and some of the decisions and approaches we took around Kubernetes, for instance. So what I'm going to cover is, like I said, just a little bit of history, a bit of context, to touch on the strategy stuff that I talked about this morning, focus a bit on the options that we faced at the time, and the approach that we took to Kubernetes, and sort of what's next for us. Right, so I guess just going back a little bit, around 2012, the agency took an enterprise view or a strategic approach to how we manage our geospatial capability, and so I actually formed a geospatial capability with a strategy. So like we had that picture earlier, enterprise geospatial platform with people and process and governance. The platform had a geospatial data warehouse, an integration technology, and a geospatial on-prem instance of Portal. They actually did really well, won a couple of awards, et cetera, and so moved us right up that maturity curve towards what a true enterprise capability would be for the agency. It soon became, got to capacity and needed to be updated, and that's kind of when I joined the agency around 2016, 2017. And we moved the whole lot, we sort of had a look at it, and we moved the whole lot to cloud. So Portal went to cloud, sat in a 10.5 version then, and really enabled us to actually collaborate with our partners outside of the agency. So cloud-based IDP, and so we were then able to and really work with our partners outside of the agency, which was one of the big requirements then. Did have ArcGIS Online in the mix there too. And soon after we deployed that, did a bit of an SRA across the platform, the whole lot, just to identify what are the big risks for us as the agency, and how we run our capability, and what is the risks to us, our enterprise geospatial capability. That's spatial as a service that I was talking about earlier. And two things were identified there really was our data warehouse and our integration platform. They were sitting on 2008 R2 instances, which was really, really old and out of support. What I did back then is I piggybacked on some of the technologies moved to cloud program, and we moved all of that to Azure 2 and got that future-proofed, and so that's in a good state right now. But at that time back then, I did indicate to the business that MapHub was something we needed to be aware of, because yes, we had just invested in it. It was a couple of years old, so it was still supported. It was still being utilized as an enterprise platform. We were consolidating our silos onto it. We were doing the good things that we were wanting to do with it. We're building it into, we're enabling the business with spatial technology. But it was something that we didn't have in there was an upgrade schedule, and so meant that the business would have to reinvest capital into keeping it up to date. But asking for that kind of thing when they've just have done it, it's difficult to present that, because it's not something that's broken at the time. But so I said, that's a bit of a risk. And then basically after doing that whole move to cloud piece of work, it became more of a risk. And so, and given that we had built that business criticality into it, and we were using it in the way that we wanted to, it meant that MapHub, a large deployment of ArcGIS Enterprise with a distributed collaboration of, distributed GIS model. So you've got high availability across the board, across multiple environments. There's a whole lot of infrastructure behind the scenes was sitting on versions of ArcGIS Enterprise which were unsupported. And so we started working with, so we got to the point where we needed to do something about it. So basically, just looking at that slide from earlier, which is the bits above, we had a good strategy, we've got people, we had some good processes, but the platform was a bit that was really taking away from us being able to deliver the spatial as a service. This is an ugly slide, sorry for the bright white. But so our data warehouses at the bottom, they were good. Our FMEO integration platforms, they're all good. But the bit on the middle, so that bit that says MapHub off to the left and ArcGIS Online to the right, with two different IDPs, with MapHub sitting at ArcGIS Enterprise 10.5 and ArcGIS Online light years ahead. It meant that that single point of entry to tools and technology was very divided. For our users, we really don't want them to, it doesn't really matter whether you're hitting ArcGIS Online or Portal, the experience, the content, that single point of entry for geospatial tools and technology was not there. So that was the thing that we needed to do something about, MapHub, to bring that whole capability together and bring it alongside ArcGIS Online and bring together that single point of entry for our users. So, options. At the time, large deployment of ArcGIS Enterprise. We could potentially, we're looking at upgrading over the top. We were looking at the time, building a whole new platform. The upgrading over the top sounded good because to me the risk was migration. It's a large, it's integrated with a whole bunch of systems. There's big business impact. There's a lot that goes on to enable the business with our spatial technology. So an upgrade over the top seemed like a good option, but it wasn't really a feasible option. And there's a bit of bespoke ways in which the platform was deployed, which meant that we couldn't ensure that we couldn't ensure with a level of confidence that we could do so seamlessly. And then also, there was a bunch in there around the version where we were at 10.5, we wanted to go to 10.9 or 10.9.1. That's a massive jump. So looking at upgrade over the top wasn't really a feasible option. So option 2 then was building a new platform, which meant, okay, we're going to have to migrate everything, which one could, it's a big piece of work, could be well managed, we can do all the change management, et cetera, et cetera. But we went back and forth around that, and then at the time then it was like, oh, what about ArcGIS for Kubernetes? And so with a large platform, we could potentially reduce the operational effort that goes into managing this. We could potentially reduce our server footprint and potentially actually have a cost-effective platform for us that'll give us that always ease of upgrade path, because that's one of the things that really stung us was not having an upgrade in our geospatial platform. So this ease of upgrade, ease of administration, access to the latest tools and technology in a platform that will enable that spatial as a service sounded more and more like a feasible option, but was quite new. So looked at it and sort of really had to assess it from the business perspective. So got technology involved in too, and that was those partnerships that I talked about earlier, and they were really, really keen to support us because it meant meant bringing in changes to them that they wanted to bring in, and big wins for them, also then wins for us. But some of the things that Scott mentioned, so all of the capability is not actually met within Kubernetes, and our platform that we currently have, MapHub, the 10.5 version of it, doesn't have a lot of bespoke capability in it. So there's 1 or 2 GB services that wouldn't be supported, and there's a couple of development that's been done around the edge, so like widgets and some of the applications, but that consumes what comes out of the platform rather than as a part of the platform itself. So looking at it, it seemed more and more feasible, like maybe this is something we could do. I mean, we could build a Kubernetes platform and federate into those Windows servers to extend the capabilities of it. And that could be cost-effective, future-proofed, enabling our spatial as a service solution. So talking to technology and eventually having conversations with Eagle, we thought, okay, this is something we could actually have a look at. But it's all new. It's like, oh, do we really want to be going down this path and you're kind of running into a jungle, you don't really know what's in there and how is this all going to work? So between technology and ourselves, we came up with a bit of a plan. We said, okay, let's do this as a program of work. And we will, stage let's go back one. We'll stage the whole piece of work. We'll do a proof of value first. We'll prove that this technology works within our subscriptions. the non-functionals that technology requires can be met, and the changes that they need to put in place can be enabled. And basically, let's get into the nets before we get out into the match, really, and just try it out, see if it works, work out some strategies, and actually, I guess, work out what those requirements are going to be for when we build production. And so that's what we did. We did a dedicated, it's been nearly a year now, of proof of value work, which we did and finished. And I guess a couple of things from that is that, yeah, we were able to build in our subscription using the automated methods that Scott was talking about. And that was one of the things that technology really wanted, was that automation piece. We found that it is performant in testing it. We were able to meet the non-functional requirements, which was great. It proven scalability, which was demonstrated. Proven ease of upgrade, which was really demonstrated too, which got a lot of people excited. And a proven economic case too. So I guess from that sense, some of the tips that we sort of learned along the way was, it was kind of, you can't really have clear requirements when you're going into a proof of value, when it's not really understood around what we're going into as much. So having real clear principles about what our success criteria are, and what we're looking to, I guess, achieve during that proof of value was key. It was also, like I said, a discovery, so it was a good almost requirements gathering session for production. One thing that was challenging was testing, because yes, we took content from the old platform and put it onto the new platform, and yes, it's a big jump, etc. And you're getting all these testers coming in, so these vendors coming in to do this testing for you, but they've got to really sort of, this is how it works in the old platform, doesn't work in the new platform, it doesn't look this way, and we really had to hold true to what those principles were. So is this something that is this defect actual defect of the platform, or is it just something that is consumed by the platform? So it's just the way in which it's configured, or is it just now just look and feel? It looks slightly different now because it's in a completely different version. So working through all of that testing was quite challenging, asking the question, is this actually something within the platform and that's being consumed differently, and understanding what that changes. So this testing piece was quite an onerous piece of work, but it was really good because it helped us define what the level of effort is for production. Because, yes, okay, we're going to need to uplift these and these widgets. Or, yes, okay, we're going to need to reconfigure these apps in this way. And we only took a sample, but it gave us a good indicator of what the effort is going to look like for the migration piece. And so, yes, given that testing was quite an onerous bit, keeping up momentum was important. It did drag on quite a bit, but it was a good thing to do. And again, just one of the principles that we've had, if we can go out of the box, it definitely does reduce technical debt and make things easier for upgrades. So, where we're at right now, we have, we are in the production build phase. We've got approval from right on top, from the executive subcommittee, that the Geospatial Uplift Program is an agency prioritized initiative, which is really good because we don't have to contend with tech remediation or something for budget. It's got its own line item, and we've prioritized in that space, which means we're in the production build phase. So we've got the project team is still the same team from the proof of value, which is really good. I've added in a change manager and a test manager, and a tech lead now to the project, obviously just because now there's a big volume of work that's going into it. And we're planning out the whole migration phase, and that's one thing which we're going to put a lot of effort into. Also getting some advisory services just to ensure that, just to sanity check what we're doing, just in terms of approach, and have we thought of and have we considered, and just make sure that we are catching as much as we can going down this path of Kubernetes, because it is going to be quite a big change, obviously, for the geospatial team, and then delivering that spatial as a service, but with the new apps and new content and new UIs, etc., that the business is going to be having too, and also the changes for all the integration. So, looking at how we're going to migrate, I've proposed a bit of a plan around. MapHub's large. It's a large platform. There's lots of content there, and you can really eat an elephant one bite at a time. So, breaking it up into those bite-sized chunks. So understanding what that change, we call it a change definition, from the top to the bottom. So what the impact is on the users, so what does that impact assessment look like? Having a strategy around all of the content with it, so that new app, the decisions around that, all the dependencies within that. Quanda is a great tool that we've used for mapping out those dependencies. Decisions around how we're going to republish those services, for instance, because of the new services that we have, and removing all of the ArcMap runtime out of the platform, and then all the way down through to data and integration. And that creates a package, and then we can move that over into the new platform and slowly but surely go through it like that. So, yeah, in conclusion, it's been a journey. It definitely has been a journey. It's not something that we just sort of switch on. It's gotten to the point where a lot of it is automated now, which is great, but it's all the considerations and fluff around the outside that needs to be worked through, all of the stuff with technology and the build and the testing, et cetera, et cetera. So the approach is to build the platform vanilla, get it tested, have that foundation in place to work with, and then migrate the apps on top of that. We're in the production build phase and look to have it up and running, hopefully. Yeah, be talking about it next time when we're all done.
I have to say that it has been quite a great journey to do this with Waka Kotahi, and it's been learning from both sides, and I think that's what's been so great about the project, is that all the good kind of automation that we've already built around deploying this product is all reusable, especially for not only going to production, but also for future builds that we may do. So it means that any of you, if you are going down this journey, and especially if you're engaging Eagle on it, we've got a really good base of knowledge from doing it already. So thanks very much, Peter, for that.
Thanks.
Hopefully that was appreciated. Righty, so I think are we out of time? Or
I think we are out of time. So there is, I want to thank Peter for that great story. I think there are some good takeaways that we can all take, whether it is migrating to Kubernetes or any other big upgrade. But now it is time for afternoon tea. And in half an hour, 5:30 I believe, there is the Road Ahead session here.
And and if you want to know more about some of the new features in ArcGIS Enterprise, or how you're migrating from the old runtime to the new, just catch either Bodabane or myself in the expo. We'll be around for the next couple of days, floating around. So just spark a conversation. Or if you want to know more about the Kubernetes deployment and some of the other new features that are available within that product, give me a shout. Happy to chat.
Thank you.
So thanks for your time. Good go myself.